Thank you so much for coming today. So I will be presenting Transforming Your Tech Talk, how to share technical information with all audiences. ちょっとだけ日本語で自己紹介します。ターゲットという会社にソフトウェア開発のコーチとして働いています。My job is to help grow the careers of engineers through training, facilitation, and introduction of new technologies and ways of working. So where am I? I'm actually in the middle of America right now, in the north, in a state called Minnesota. We are famous for lakes. We have about 10,000 lakes in our state. But right now, we are actually more famous for snow because we have over a meter of snow on the ground right now. The city I live in is Minneapolis. There's a picture there. So my promise or goal of this session is to provide you with time-tested tips, tricks, and techniques to communicate technical information to an audience of any experience level. I struggled with this early in my career, coming from a place where all employees were technical, came from technical backgrounds. And after leaving that company, I quickly discovered that communicating with non-technical team members took a lot more effort and time than I was expecting. There is certainly nothing easy about explaining complicated technical information in an understandable way. So let's start with a few tips. Our first topic today is how to explain technical concepts using the real world or objects in the real world. Many folks lack the context to understand very technical information directly, and it's easy to rely on jargon or technical terminology to explain technical concepts, but that can leave many audience members confused. So fortunately, there are some tips and tricks that you can use to help make this information more understandable. First, we'll talk about figures of speech. So in English, we can often use analogies and metaphors to help make comparisons between technical concepts and the real world. So analogies describe a likeness or relationship between two objects. So something like monolithic architecture is like a house of cards. It can be built quickly, but it falls apart just as easily. So in reality, monolithic architecture is not literally a house of cards, right? It's infrastructure, but they're both easy to build and also easy to break. Metaphors are slightly different in that they describe an object or action in a way that isn't literally true, but can help explain an idea. So for example, software engineers have this concept of something called spaghetti code, where basically there's a lot of logic that kind of jumps from place to place in code that's very, very difficult to read. And so that's not made up out of literal noodles, right? It's not literally pasta, it's computer code, but it's very difficult to untangle. So just like trying to separate a noodle from a bowl of pasta, it's difficult to break down the logic in spaghetti code. One thing to be a little bit cautious of when using analogies and metaphors is pop culture references. So things like movies, music, games, or sports may not be understood by everyone on more diverse teams. So for example, my team at work, my team of coaches are all sports fans, and they love using sports analogies to explain things. Unfortunately, I'm more of an esports person, more of a video game fan than an American football fan. So a lot of their analogies don't work for me. Also, language and cultural backgrounds can cause different reactions to what speakers may interpret as a well-understood idea. So let's take a well-known English idiom that you may or may not have heard before. An apple a day keeps the doctor away. Does anyone have a guess as what the corresponding Japanese kotowaza for this common English idiom would be? Go ahead and type it into the Room B Slack, or excuse me, Discord if you're interested in responding. Give a second here. So it's actually hara hachibun mei ni sha irasu, but context is very important here. So in English, the idiom implies that if you eat a certain food, in this case, an apple, you can be healthier. You wouldn't need to go to the doctor. But the Japanese kotowaza focuses less on what you eat and more on how much you eat. So this can change the way that explanations for ideas are interpreted. So this can be very, very tricky. So when you're using proverbs or kotowaza to explain ideas, you have to be conscious of the cultural background of your audience. And here's just a summary of how to use analogies and metaphors that can be powerful tools to explain technical concepts. Watch out for pop culture or sports references, and especially with proverbs. Moving on to our second topic of the day, how to make your technical presentations more effective. I'm going to be talking about when to show your code as part of a presentation and when not to show your code, as well as how to make your audience remember more of your content. First is a very, very important idea, and hopefully I can explain this well. Your code does not speak for itself. And what I mean by that is engineers often think that code speaks for itself because it describes the solution to a problem. But the code can only give you the solution itself. What it lacks is all of the ideas and all the concepts behind why particular decisions were made. And that why is very important to understanding code in many cases. Most of your audience is not going to have the context that you do as the author of a software program. So why shouldn't you show code during a presentation? The first reason is your audience is going to try to read that code. And if they're reading your code, they aren't listening to your talk. Code on the screen has the exact same problem that we see with slides that have a ton of text on them. And that is that audiences can read, they can listen, but they can't do both at the same time. So you're going to lose a bit of your effectiveness as a speaker if all of your audience is reading your code. Secondly, code is very contextual. I mentioned this on the previous slide. You're not going to be able to show the whole program, and the parts of the program that are not on the screen may limit the context that the audience has about the problem. The code cannot tell you the why, only what decision was made. Finally, well, not finally, but ask yourself, what does showing your code do for the audience? If your audience is made up of leadership, is the code even worth showing? Is it going to be beneficial to them? Is it relevant for the audience? In terms of technical audiences, so if you're presenting to a lot of engineers, or you're doing a code walkthrough or a code review, use your discretion to what kind of code you want to show to your audience. What will showing the code accomplish in terms of audience understanding? Let's take a simple example here. Marubatsu game. So in America, this is called tic-tac-toe, and it is one of my 5-year-old son's favorite games. Most people know this game. It's played on a 3x3 grid. One player is Maru, one player is Batsu, and they take turns placing symbols on the grid. The goal is to line up 3, either vertically, horizontally, or diagonally. So, say I'm giving a presentation to a mixed audience on how to develop an AI to play this game. I could very easily throw up some code for figuring out the next move to make using an algorithm that analyzes all possible choices and chooses the best one. Unfortunately, note that this is only a small part of the code is shown, and we still lack the context around the entire program itself. So what does this exactly get us? If instead we take a look at this animation, so this animation is showing the code running. The tree represents all possible moves for the game, while the numbers represent outcomes for a particular move. A -1, a -1, means the current player will lose the game if the move is made. 0 means there will be a tie, and a 1 means the current player will win. Circular nodes, so circles on the tree, will select the largest value of all their children, and they represent the current player's possible moves. Whereas square nodes will select the smallest value because they represent the opponent's moves. So utilizing these rules, we're trying to find a path that leads to a win at the top level, which we see there with the tree being fully green. So it's difficult to explain quickly, but this is a whole lot easier to visualize than reading the code on the left side of the screen. Humans are visual creatures, and our memory is triggered more often by images than text. So studies have shown that audiences who attend a presentation that contains mostly text slides only recall about 10% of the information 3 days later. We have an idiom in English, a picture is worth 1,000 words, and science agrees with us. Recallability of audiences jumps from 10% to 65% when images are frequently used to help explain ideas during presentations. Images are incredibly powerful tools to help audiences understand and recall. A brief summary involving your code doesn't speak for itself. Animations can lead to better understanding and recall, and data backs up that information. Now, for our final topic of the day, storytelling, captivating your audience with the power of data. I'm going to discuss not only why data is powerful, but how the same data can be used to tell many different stories to your audience. Why do we tell stories? Humans are storytellers by nature. It's how our brains are wired. Everything from our myths and legends to lessons that we teach our children are all in the form of stories. We use stories to inform, persuade, entertain, and inspire. Let's use our last example of the day. This is a graph showing the number of calories in a Kentucky chicken wrap and comparing that number against some other food from other restaurants. But this graph doesn't give us a lot of information. First of all, the horizontal axis of the graph starts at 590, not 0. And secondly, the other restaurants, the information about the other restaurants is not clear. Which food items are being compared against the KFC crispy chicken twister shown here? We don't know. However, this graph does contain enough data to tell several different stories to our audience, depending on what our goal happens to be. For example, say we are the pizza restaurant. If we happen to be the pizza restaurant and want to convince potential customers that our food is healthier than anyone else's, we can display the data on the graph shown here, with the smallest value on the vertical axis shown to be 575. And at a quick glance, you can see that compared to popular dishes from other restaurants, we have a lower calorie count. The second story is a little bit different. Say we're a nutritionist trying to counsel a client on improving their nutrition. They may show the same set of data in a completely different way, starting the vertical axis at 0 and stopping at 600. There we go. What does this story communicate? All the options on the graph are not good for your health. The pizza isn't that great of a choice after all. And our last example, a hungry high school student trying to convince their health-conscious parents to go out for dinner, and they would be telling a completely different story. They might keep the vertical axis starting at 0, but would scale the maximum value upwards to minimize visual differences in calorie values. So all the options are the same, right? And none are that bad for you when you factor in the total number of calories most folks eat in a day. And I should note that in America, this value is 2,000. I'm not sure what it is in Japan. We can probably do with less here in America. So, but anyway, as you can see, the same data can show a lot of different conclusions. So in summary, we tell stories to inform, persuade, entertain, and inspire. Your data has many stories to tell. Storytelling with data is incredibly powerful, and how you use that power ethically is to persuade an audience is up to you. And that is all I have for today. So I hope this was helpful in terms of some tips, tricks, and techniques to approach showing technical information to different types of audiences in different ways. If you ever have any questions, please reach out to me. Nihongo demo, eigo demo daijoubu desu yo. Either is fine. Thank you so much, Scrum Gathering Tokyo. It's been a pleasure as always. Thank you.